This is a graph I made a while ago about the song No Promises by Cheat Codes and Demi Lovato. And I decided to make a little video explaining it further for a couple of reasons. First, a lot of you weren't following me back then because it was when I first started out. And the other reason, though, is that people have been telling me that video content is sort of easier to digest. So I think I'm going to do a bunch of those explaining past graphs that I made. And I wanted to start with this one because this is one of my favorite melodies that I've done a graph on, and it's also a super interesting melody in my opinion. And the thing I found really, really interesting about this melody is how the metric balance shifts as the section goes forward. So usually when you have a section in pop, normally it'll be four phrases, and the four phrases won't necessarily repeat each other, but they'll usually start and end more or less in the same metric position. This song doesn't do that. It does. Every phrase has what I call an anchor fragment, which is these three notes in this case, that appear exactly in the same metric spot in every phrase. But something that's really clever in this melody is that the parts around them, what I call the pickup, the part that comes before that anchor fragment, and the tail, the part that comes after it, they change in length, and that allows for shifting in the metric balance. So the first time you have a relatively short tail, so 4/8 notes, that's like half a measure long. And you have that was the pickup, and then you have a longer tail. Then you have more or less the same length pickup, but you have a shorter tail that lets you make a longer pickup for the third phrase and then for the fourth phrase. So the metric balance kind of shifts from phrases that start in the middle of, first the pickup, but let's say the middle of the last measure of each phrase. It shifts to phrases that start earlier in the beginning of that measure and end earlier. So let me give you an example. So this is the anchor fragment, those three notes that I was mentioning. Right? Three notes that repeat just as is. The first phrase, there's a short pickup. And then a tail that has basically two of these units. And then the next phrase, the second phrase, starts similar with a short pickup, but the tail is also short. So it sounds like this. That's it. That's the second phrase. And the third phrase then starts with a longer, you can see there's like these two units. It starts with a longer pickup. And then the fourth phrase. So it shifted from something that looks like this, so green, orange, and then two blue units, which is the blue units are the tail and the green is the pickup. And because the second phrase was shorter, it allowed for just a different balance. It's the same length, but a different balance. So you get two green units, so 2 units of pickup, and then the anchor fragment, and then you get a short tail, and the same in the fourth phrase. And of course, it ends with 2 kind of empty units to just finish out those 8 measures with sort of an echo. So I think that's really interesting. Another song that I did a graph on a little while ago was that had an anchor fragment was Closer by the Chainsmokers. But in that song, they didn't shift the metric balance. They just used it to kind of play with the pitches around the anchor fragment to make it interesting. So it's a different approach. I think just thinking about an anchor fragment as something useful and something that you can use to manipulate things around it, I think that's a really useful tool. So something to think about, and yeah, really interesting song. I really love this section, this melody, and I hope that was useful and you learned something. Soft Paris, Top 40 Theory. See you soon.